What's up, y'all? My name is Travis Handler. I am the chair for Doane Leadership Educators. I'm here with another segment of On the Way Up, our interview series. Super excited for the guest we have this week, a man who might need no introduction amongst the Doane community, President Roger Hughes. How you doing, sir?
Doing great, Travis. How you doing?
Doing well. So before we really get into the leadership questions, would you mind just kind of breaking down, your childhood, high school, where you grew up, college, et cetera, stuff like that?
Well, I'm a native of Crawford, Nebraska. That's way in the northwest corner of the state. I grew up there my whole life. From there, I went to Crawford High School, graduated, did 1 year at Nebraska Western Junior College. I played basketball there, then transferred to Doane after that, and that would have been in 1979. Finished my degree, I finished my undergraduate degree in December of 81. Officially graduated in 82 with the class of 82. And I began my master's right away. I finished my master's at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. Started on PhD, and from there I was a GA for Coach Osborne on the football team. At that time, they only allowed GAs 2 years, so I finished, after those 2 years, I did another year to finish my doctorate, so I went back to the exercise phys department and finished my doctorate in 1987. From there, I got my first coaching job in Whitewater, Wisconsin. Was there for about 6 months and got offered a bigger job at Cameron University in Lawton, Oklahoma. The head coach there was former Doane coach Brian Neighbor. We coached so well they dropped football there, so I didn't do a very good job. And then from there, I was lucky enough to be named the offensive coordinator at Dartmouth. I was there for 8 years, 9 years. I got there in 92. I had the pleasure of coaching Jay Fiedler, who replaced Dan Marino when he was finishing his career. Jay played in the NFL for about 11 years, I think. From there, I became the head coach at Princeton. I was at Princeton for 10 years. I was fired in 2009, was with the Omaha Nighthawks as a receiver coach. That was in the United Football League. We called it the Unreliable Football League because you don't get your paycheck. It was a startup. And so I did that for 1 year, and then was fortunate enough to be named the head coach at Stetson University in DeLand, Florida. That's about 20 miles straight west of Daytona Beach. And the challenge was unique because essentially I had to start a program from scratch. And literally my first day on the job was had a desk and a phone, and that was Stetson football at the Division I level when I started. And was there subsequently for about 10 years. And then interviewed and was offered the job here at Doane. I was named president May 7th. Started officially on July 1st. Even though I put an extra week in here to get my feet on the ground, and I've been drinking from a fire hose ever since.
Yeah, you definitely have. You've been incredibly active in the Doane community, and I'm going to deviate a little bit because I'm curious about. I didn't realize that Stetson position was a startup. Can you talk a little bit more about what particular challenges starting up a program like that posed?
Well, it's both challenging and sometimes in some ways easier. Anytime you go in to start an organization, like when I became the head coach at Princeton, and even when I became the offensive coordinator at Dartmouth, when you go in there are certain cultures already established. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad. So usually the first couple of years that you're at an organization, you're spending the whole time changing the culture, increasing the expectations, teaching people what the modus operandi is, so to speak. The nice thing about a startup is you don't have to do that. You actually get to come in and start your culture right from scratch. The downside from a football aspect is, in that sport, big guys beat up on little guys, so to speak. And so as freshmen, we decided to build the program with freshmen and let them grow into it, not to go to the transfer area. And that meant it slowed our winning percentage down, but I felt it was going to build a stronger foundation for the culture we were going to try to build going forward. And so the unique challenge of a startup is, literally, I could tell you 1,000 stories about things you take for granted as a coach, like having footballs or having goalposts or having a field to play on or having any kind of uniforms. We had none of that. And so, and actually, Travis, I interviewed for the Doane presidency 10 years ago. And I unfortunately didn't get the job, but after being at that startup, it's probably a good thing I didn't, frankly, because after being in that startup and all the different facets of the university that I had to work with as I established, that's from equipment to grounds to student support to recruiting to financial aid, all that stuff, because I had to work closely with it, made me a much better candidate now. And so I would argue I'm probably a better president now than I would have been had I gotten the job 10 years ago. So the big guy upstairs has a way of having the right timing. So starting a startup, the whole thing about, for me, culture is uh, a series of non-negotiable expectations. So in other words, if you have the culture established, everybody has the same expectations of everyone else. And so they have a way to react to adversity. They have a way to do things as far as interacting with clients outside, as far as interacting with the workforce inside. And those are non-negotiable. So in other words, you walk in late, if you have a great culture, everybody on the team should be saying, where have you been? You could have been making 2 calls to recruits instead of being late. Why are you thinking of yourself more than the team? And so that's really the hardest part of running. Leadership skills are pretty transferable to a lot of different areas, because it's all about getting the organization to understand what's expected, to perform at that standard of that you need to, and frankly, always look for ways to raise that standard, and then establishing the expectations that you have for them and that they can expect from you as return as a leader.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And so you alluded to it a moment ago, but can you talk to me a little bit about what sort of leadership skills, and I guess because you said it's transferable, you can apply it to coaching or your presidency or both. What sort of leadership skills do you find to be most pertinent to both of those roles?
Well, the one characteristic that I think any great leader has to have is humility. The reason I say that is, if you're not humble, you end up becoming one of 2 kinds of leaders. There's egocentric leaders where everything's about the boss. And then there's principle-centered leaders where everything's about values and principles, and you make your decisions based on a series of beliefs that you have. Going back to the egocentric kind, in that type of organization, the head coach or the president makes every decision. And so the organization can't function without that leader doing what they need to do. Some of those leaders are very control freakish, and many times they don't listen to their subordinates. They don't listen to the people on the front lines. Where a principle-centered leader, when they're making decisions based on principles and guidelines, if you are able to teach those guidelines to those you are leading, then you can leave the room and the organization continues to function. Or if someone encounters an unexpected adversity, something you just can't plan for everything, they'll know how to react and react in the appropriate manner because they understand what the leader wants and what's expected of them and what the goals are for the organization. And so I try to be the latter of those things. And I think, if you're looking at a principle-centered leader, one of the things that I truly believe is, as you look at, and this is not my words, it's Simon Sinek's words out of his book, The Ultimate Leader, I think it is, or Infinite Game, excuse me, The Infinite Game's the name of the book. All the people at the top of the organization have all the power and no knowledge. All the people at the ground floor on the front line have all the knowledge and the power. Until the people at the top relinquish power to those on the ground floor, your organization can't function. For example, if you're on a Navy ship, you mentioned that your dad was military. The sailors are the ones doing all the stuff, and the captain sits up on the crow's nest or whatever he does there, and on the bridge, and is doing everything. Well, there are ways to make the organization more efficient if the captain doesn't listen to the people who are doing it. Well, there was one book actually I read called "It's Your Ship," where they took the worst ship in the Navy to the best. One of the things they had to do was they had to replace these bolts all the time because they were corroded with the seawater. And it took a ton of time, a ton of downtime for the ship, but they couldn't function in that area where they were placing the bolts. And someone, a private, said, why don't we use stainless steel bolts? That way they won't corrode. The captain says, that's a great idea. I never thought about that. They started using those bolts and they ended up saving the Navy hundreds of thousands of dollars in manpower and materials, simply because the captain was willing to listen to the person on the front line who had a way to do it. And so that's one of the things I hope to instill here is, no leader has all the answers by any means, but I'm hoping to instill an atmosphere where people are comfortable enough to say, hey, listen, I think we can do this a little bit better this way. Because what I've found is people rise to the level of expectation you have in front of them. And if I walk around this campus and I marvel at the talent with our faculty, our staff, the dedication, commitment to the students. And because of that, we get to interact with some really bright students. And so my hope is that we create that atmosphere where I can allow that talent to come to the surface and then get the heck out of the way. That's the best situation that we can be in. And to
Yeah.
me, that's leadership.
Absolutely. And so just piggybacking right off that, can you talk about some of the ways in which you see leadership displayed by our faculty on campus, and some of the ways that maybe students wouldn't recognize, or maybe that we don't immediately see?
Well, the answer is yes. I mean, if you go to the sports teams, which we have a high percentage of our students are athletes, and I would tell you that the fine arts do not get enough recognition. When you want to talk about teamwork, what better example of teamwork is an orchestra playing music together or an a cappella group singing together? I think that's underrated for that. So going back, the faculty are leaders of their class. They're probably leaders in their profession, so they're going out to conferences or publishing papers that others in their area are looking toward to further the knowledge in the literature. And so I would say our students that are captains of our team certainly developed that. You know, it's been fun to come back and look at the teams that a lot of times, as I was a coach, I was so busy I didn't have a chance to watch a lot of the other teams. I'd get to watch 1 or 2 volleyball games a year. Well, now I've been able to come to 3 or 4, and just to watch the development and how the girls pick themselves up through adversity. Some of the wins they've gotten have been ones that had to come from behind. And you know, the best thing that a leader can do once things are going bad, and this comes from the book that I base all my leadership principles on, it's called Extreme Ownership, how Navy SEALs lead and win. And what they say when things are hitting the fan, so to speak, and you don't know what to do, there's 3 things you should do. First, relax, look around, then make the call. And I see that all the time amongst our athletes on the field. They're going through some kind of adversity, and they calm down, go back to the fundamentals, look at what's around, and then go execute. And if we can instill that in our students, when they get out into what I call the real world, they're going to be head and shoulders over those who've not had to go through that adversity. And they're going to be the ones that people will look to be led. They will be natural leaders that others will want to follow, and therefore, no one likes to drive the car from the trunk. If that makes sense. So if you want to be behind the steering wheel, which I think most people do and have control of your own destiny, the greatest gift we can give any of our students going forward is that gift of leadership skills, because no matter what they do, and your generation is going to change careers 3 times and jobs probably 15. I've always felt that if you jump in on that leadership side of stuff, you're going to be able to climb the corporate ladder, so to speak, much faster than your colleagues.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so you mentioned earlier, I mean, I inquired earlier about the challenges posed by having to start up the program at Stetson. And I feel like in some ways, you know, given the difficulties that Doane has faced in the recent years, that you are in a kind of in a similar way, you know, looking to kind of or at least jumpstart things at Doane. So can you talk a little bit about what particular challenges being in this position now as the president poses, and the skills that it's going to necessitate of you in order to kind of right the ship, so to speak?
Well, the first thing is that people don't understand. So when I was the head of the organization as a football coach, so it's all about communication. People, especially your generation and faculty, want to know why before what. So when I was coaching 10, 20 years ago, and when I played, when a coach told you to run through that wall, you ran through it. You didn't ask questions. Now the kids are going, wait a minute, that wall looks pretty dang hard there. Why are we doing this? You know what I'm saying? I think faculty the same way. They want to understand the end game before they commit themselves to getting to that end game. So people want to know why before what. The other thing that as a head coach in football, you have a lot of different constituencies you have to talk to. You have the alumni, you have the school administration, you have the faculty, you have the parents, you have your team. Each one speaks in a little different language. And so similarly, as a college president, We have the same thing. We've got all those same factions that I have to speak to, and it's crucial that I speak in the language of the constituencies. When I'm talking to the Board of Trustees, we're talking more business and high-level things there. When I'm talking with the faculty, I'm trying to talk in their language from the standpoint of how academics works. And one thing I learned here at Doane, there's a ton of acronyms, for example, so you can speak in those acronyms. Obviously, when I'm talking to the students, it's a whole different conversation about what they need and what they desire. And so the key is to be able to communicate with the group that you're at to get the message across. Because anytime that you're selling, anytime that you're recruiting, anytime that you're fundraising, I would say when learning as well, in learning, all those modalities are really a transfer of passion. So a salesman if I'm selling you a car, my passion for the car has to translate to you. When you're trying to ask an alum for a donation, the emotion behind that, it's a transfer of emotion. So they have that emotional pull to write that check, so to speak. Same way in trying to inspire people to do certain things for the good of the organization. There's got to be a transfer of passion and emotion to that, so that they feel moved to maybe do things that they normally wouldn't want to do, and do them at a time where they may not want to do them. If that makes sense. And the crucial part about building teams is to get people to understand that you have to sacrifice the me for the we. That's an old Pat Riley saying, but the point is, it goes back to every leader. When we wake up in the morning, we think of two things, our leadership team. Number one is complete the mission, and the mission has two parts: make someone better every day and get better every day. And then take care of the team. Let me say that again, take care of the team. Because I'm responsible for all the results. I don't get all the results, but I'm responsible to take care of the people who get the results. So you have to take care of your team. It's a true leadership is a people-oriented profession. It's not, so talk about being a manager and a leader. A manager, to me, manages by the bottom line, and the number one thing is balancing the budget or making money. Where the leader, the number one thing is take care of his team, because if my team gets better, I'll eventually get the goals that the manager wanted, if that makes sense. And I think it's a hugely, hugely different. Not one organization in the history of the earth has ever been managed out of a crisis. They've been led out of a crisis. And I use those words explicitly to explain the difference, because it's huge. Because if you're going to be a great leader, you have to give up yourself and take care of the team first. And that's why it's, for some people, very hard to be with.
Absolutely. And this next question is going to dovetail, I think, probably quite nicely with what you were just delineating. You were emphasizing culture a lot, and that seems to be something that's very important to your definition of leadership. Why is it so important to you to cultivate a culture rather than to just serve as a head, to be a leader in that way?
Because for two reasons. One, if the organization is going to function at its full potential, everybody needs to be in the boat rowing the oar, and we've got to be all rowing the same way at the same timing. The other reason is because the organization is going to move more quickly to the goals that you want if everybody's on the same page. And so, and that's hard to do. Again, if that was easy to do, humans generally is the only species that will do less than they have to if they're able. And so getting people, and again, here's the other thing about culture. They say the leader controls the culture. Well, maybe not, because when it gets down to it, I spend a heck of a lot less time with you than you do the other students, all right? Well, if the students are all bought into the culture, I don't have to worry, because if you came in late, so to speak, your peers are going to say, well, we don't accept that here. That's not how we do that. And or even more importantly, let's say someone starts complaining about something. Oh, we don't complain here. We go fix the problem. And so I've told that same thing to the faculty. If we want the culture to change here for the better, every member in the organization has to take responsibility for the culture. Everyone in the organization has to raise that level of performance. You've got to ask more of yourself than you did previously if you want the organization to get better, if that makes sense. And this sounds all corny and very Pollyanny, I guess, and I am the corniest president in America, I'll say that right now, but it's absolutely crucial. And when you look at the great organizations in the sports world, you look at the Patriots, you look at the Alabama, you look at the Blacks in New Zealand, the rugby team have won unbelievable things. It's interesting when there's actually a book called Captain's Class. And they look at the teams that have won over the years, all different sports. And they found the number one correlating factor was not the head coach. It was the captains. The leaders of the team were the most important factor of that team's success.
That's awesome. That and something else I was just thinking about. You you sort of drew a distinction between being a leader versus being a manager, and I think you articulated the difference quite nicely. But I wanted to really foot stomp that. How for leaders on Doane campus in particular, for the student base that's going to be watching this, how can we work to be leaders rather than managers of people?
Uh, well, first of all, instead of telling them what to do, the first thing you do is you ask them, what can I do for you? Okay. When you get up, and this is not new, but I'll go ahead and do it. Do you pray to be blessed, or do you pray to be a blessing? Okay, if you pray to be blessed, you're counting on someone else to do something for you. That may or may not happen. If you pray to be a blessing, you have total control of that. You can be a blessing to anyone that you want. So where are your priorities? And again, it gets back to Michael Jordan had a saying where it's funny, all the guys who want individual accolades, all the ones who want the awards, if they make their team better and their team wins, they end up getting the award because their teams win. In other words, if you sacrifice your own goals to make the team better, you end up getting your goals anyway. And that's how great organizations work.
Fantastic. Thank you. And just going to pivot a little bit. I'm going to read off this. There was a few things when they initially had the press release that you were hired. There was a quote I picked up that I liked. And again, this might be redundant, but I still think it's worth highlighting. You said that a particular goal of yours is to help young people become leaders and the best versions of themselves, instilling habits and values that will make them successful for their entire life. Why is that particular mission so important to you?
Well, when you look at what Doane does, okay, we have a great vision statement, we have a great mission statement, very well written, people put a lot of work into it, but I bet you can't recite that. I can't, unless I'm reading it. Here's what we do. We take great students, make them exceptional leaders for generational success. We build leaders. That's what Doane does. And everyone on this campus needs to understand that's our purpose. We have a vision, we have a mission, but our purpose, we build leaders. And if we make them leaders of their family, leaders of their community, and leaders of their profession, they will eventually be leaders of the world. And that's what we do here. And just because we're a small college in Nebraska, our alumni have been extremely successful all over the world. In fact, every job that I've gotten had an alumni connection that gave me a chance to get my foot in the door. And I think if you build an alumni base, essentially when you come to school as a student, you're building your brand, okay? And your brand is going to take you wherever you want to go. But here's the key. Nobody does it by themselves. Everybody has help with their career. Everybody inadvertently is part of a team. When you get married, it's a team. And so if we can still instill that leadership idea that I need to lead the people around me, you're going to be a great team builder, which means that you're going to get the benefits of that team's effectiveness as you go forward. The faster you learn that you don't do anything by yourself. Okay, everybody has help. Everybody needs other people to get done what they need to. If you can coordinate those groups together, your group is going to get better faster, which means that you accelerate better. And as I said earlier, when the team wins, individually, you get the goals that you want to.
Fantastic. No, that's great. And so pulling again from the same interview, it mentions one of the things that they mentioned in the interview, in the press release rather, is that you were capable of communicating with a diverse audience base. Why is being able to recognize and speak to a diverse base so important to being a good and functional leader?
Well, let me explain what I mean by diverse. A lot of times when you say diverse, people are automatically thinking it's your race or your sexual orientation. There's a lot of diversity. When I tried to fill my team, when I talked about diversity, um, it was about race, it was about socioeconomic background, it was about experience, it was about your specialty. There's a ton of different things that I take into inclusion. And when you're building a team, you've got to be aware of the skills that you have, and more importantly, the skills you don't have, so that when you're adding people to your team, the sum of the parts is greater than the whole, if that makes sense. So that's the key. You've got to have people on your team that have certain skill sets that you don't have, if that makes sense. That's why I believe a big thing is strength finders, and that's another story down the road. But so when I'm building my team, I want to make sure that I hire people who are smarter than me. Because if you hire people, and here's the 5 things I look for when I hire people, when I recruit kids. Number 1, character. Because character determines if you're going to achieve the potential. Okay, when you watch a film, for example, of a high school highlight film, they have their best plays. I need to know what's right here, because that's what's going to get you up at night to watch early film. That's what's going to get on the practice field earlier to perfect your skills. Number 2, you got to have work ethic. Hard work is crucial. Hard work and perseverance trump talent every time. Number 3, ego out the door. It's not about you, it's about the team. Number 4 is the ability to be coached hard. Okay, in football, I used to say we play a violent, physical, passionate, emotional game. I'd love to tell you I never raised my voice. That would be a lie. Okay, but Travis, I never called it yelling. I called it coaching with volume. You know what I'm saying? But my point is, you're going to go through adversity. Okay, are you gonna cry? Are you gonna just wilt? Or are you gonna say, "Yep, I screwed up, learn from it, and move on"? And that's why we talked about. And I'm not advocating corporal punishment. When I talked about family, to me, family was I'm going to love you and I'm going to spank you with the same intensity. And there's times you need a kick in the backside. There's times you need a hug, and you're going to get plenty of both. And that's what great leaders do, is they understand which button that person needs to get them over this, whatever they're facing. The 5th thing I look for is talent. The talent was the ability to do the job or play the position I told you to play, which goes back to that ego. Because you have to fit, you have a role on the team, and you have to understand it, accept it, and excel at it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I think is really important. And I'll just add one more thing. The number 1 factor in the success of any organization is the attitude of the leader. If the leader doesn't believe you can get it done, you're not getting it done. If the leader doesn't focus on the strengths of their teammates rather than griping about what they don't have, it's not going to get done. If the leader doesn't make sure that they get, you either coach it or you tolerate it. Okay? Because if you tolerate mistakes, you tolerate a low-level performance, your team's not going to do very well. The leader has to set the standard and bring everyone else to help him set the standard going forward.
No, that's fantastic. And I can see the through line with the references you made to accountability earlier, and how pertinent that is. And one of the things that you mentioned that I wanted to follow up on is being cognizant both of your strengths and your weaknesses. And so I wanted to ask, just sort of practically, how can students go about finding and recognizing where their strengths lie and where their weaknesses lie, at the same time?
Well, I'm glad you bring this up. We have an alum named Troy Cantor who's been in the measurement field, highly successful. I actually coached him as a quarterback here when I was working on my master's. And he got into it, but he says the number 1 thing college should do, it should help kids find out what they're great at. And that goes back to the Strength Finders thing that I talked about. Strength Finders is a Gallup organization that have looked at the traits. They've taken essentially all people and broken their personalities into 34 different traits. And the premise is this: if you were going to go out and get better, a lot of people go work on their weaknesses. And here's the deal: if I have a strength that's a weakness of yours, you can work on that weakness all you want to. You're still never going to be as strong as I am in that area. So find your strength and accentuate those. That's what they're saying. Figure out those 5 things that you're really good at, or the skill set that you have, and then utilize that, leverage that to move you forward rather than wasting your time trying to fix things that no matter what you do, will never be as good as someone who has that strength. And I'm a huge believer in that. I give strength finders to my players because it helped me learn how to coach. For example, when I was coaching that professional league in Omaha, one of my receivers had, his number one was harmony. So I couldn't yell at him. I had to put my arm around him. Hey, Mike, I love that first step, but that second step stunk. Now we got to get something else going here. Or if they were, one was analytical. So I had to talk to Roy Hall from Ohio State. I talked to him, okay, we take a 6-inch step here and a 4-inch step here, and that's how I had to put it. And so I learned how to talk with them, going back to talking the language that they understand. All of them were competitive. So generally, as a coach, the day before a game, you give them what we call a tip sheet, kind of a list of things they have, reminders that they have to have. I didn't do that. Everyone was competitive. I played Jeopardy. And so I divided them up and made teams, and we had Jeopardy and had to ask them questions, and they thought I was nuts until they got 20 seconds into the game, and every one of them were fighting each other to get the right answer. But so that's why I try to utilize those strengths, and I think students should absolutely. One of my dreams is the second semester I'll have all the freshmen here do a strength finders, and then sit down with each of them and talk about what their strengths mean. But more importantly, if you're a harmony and another person is a competitive guy, because I'm competitive number one, okay, how do you interact? How do you have to talk to each other? Or if you're the manager as a competitor and this guy has harmony, what skill set, what should you have that person doing? I had one coach on my team called a woo, win over others. He's welcome wagon. He was out front at every elevator. Every time the parent came in, he was talking about that because that was his strength. So I used these strength finder traits to put people in the places they could have the greatest success. And if they're having great success, that means the organization is getting better.
Fantastic. And so one of the things I wanted to ask about before we kind of transition to a wrap up, one of the things that that I love about sport is that I think it provides a perfect, sort of microcosm for the real world. And so can you talk a little bit about, you can talk either in the specific context of football or just broadly sports in general, what sort of lessons can be derived from sport that sort of connect to the real world and leadership?
Great question. Well, first of all, if you look at skills that corporations look for, usually the number one, can he work on a team? Think about it. The surgeon in the operating room is essentially captain of the team. He's telling all the nurses what to do, and they have to work as a team if that person's flatlining on the gurney. So everything requires teams. And if there's one criticism I have of our society it's been, I'm going to get mine. I'm going to, if I don't like the coach, I'm going to change coaches because it's got to be the coach's fault. Well, wait a minute. Are we teaching young people to really fight through adversity? Because as you said, in the real world, can't find another coach. I mean, you go to another job, okay, but then you got to start at the bottom and work your way up again. Where if you're resilient, everyone's going to have setbacks. That's the thing that, like in football, for example, there's not a question if you're going to get knocked down. You're going to get knocked down, right? The question is, do you keep getting back up and get back up and get back up and get back up? And each time you get back up, you're a little bit better. You're a little bit wiser. You're a little bit stronger. Look at the weight room, for example. If you don't put maximum weight on and get buried by that every once in a while, you're not going to gain the strength you need to. So you have to fail to get better. That's what I think athletics teach. And it also teaches find your role, excel at it as much as you can, but you're helping others get better. And it goes back to, if you help, I believe, if I help enough people at Doane get to their goals, Doane's going to get to the goal I want to get to. And if I help every student get to their goals, wow, what kind of world are we going to have? Because when they leave this place, they're going to have those skills. I was asked a question on my interview. What do you want your legacy to be? So if I asked you what you want your legacy to be at Doane, you probably haven't really thought about that much. Well, that's what I hadn't thought about it at all. And I'm going, whoa, this is a tough one. What am I going to do? So here's what I said. I've always found that when I get in that situation, if I speak from the heart, it works best. And usually the big guy upstairs, frankly, puts words in my mouth that helps me. I don't know, it's uncanny, but he always comes through. And so the first thing I said, well, first of all, my first goal would be to leave it better than I found. So every job that I've had, I've left it better than I found. How much better, I don't know, but it was always better. And then I said, you know, if I'm really doing my job well, when I leave, no one will miss me because I will have trained the leaders around me to be so effective. If I walk out of the room or walk off into the sunset, the organization is going to function just fine without me. So I believe the best leaders are the ones where a project gets done, everyone looks around and goes, wow, who's the leader? You know, my goal is to be able to train the people here or help the people here get their skills better so that literally when I walk out of the door, don't keep just functioning at the highest level it can and still trying to achieve more. Because again, it's about getting better each day. The biggest opponent, the biggest enemy of greatness is satisfaction. Because if you become satisfied, you know, success makes you slow to learn and quick to forget. Slow to learn meaning, well, we've always done it this way and it's worked. Well, you have to evolve all the time or the competition is going to catch up. And quick to forget means, remember how hard you worked when you were climbing that ladder to get to where you want to go. And you get to the top all of a sudden, well, I got this. I don't need to put in that extra time. Listen, when you're number one, that means everyone's number one goal is to knock you off. You have to be better. Our volleyball team now is ranked 23. And in my mind, I'm thinking that's 23 reasons other people want to kick your backside. So you got to be ready for that and rise to that level of expectation. That's where Nick Saban in Alabama and Bill Belichick at the Patriots and the All Blacks in New Zealand, they're never satisfied. They always look they can do better. The Navy SEALs, when they come back off any mission, whether it's good or bad, they check their ego at the door and they say, okay, how can we do this better? And each person looks at himself introspectively and says, you know, I could have loaded those guns a lot faster. Or I could have packed that parachute a little bit better. Or you know what? Instead of going on this path, if we'd have come to here, we'd have been complimentary in our assault. You know what I'm saying? So that's the thing I admire about the SEALs, that they're never satisfied with where they're at. Now that doesn't mean you don't enjoy the success. You absolutely enjoy the success because it's hard. Winning is hard, but you can't let that win stifle your need to get better. And that's where, if you look at my strength finders, my number one is competitive. My number two is achievement. So I have to achieve something every day. I mean, even on vacation, I don't sleep much is the bottom line because I'm always obsessed with getting better, if that makes sense. And it's not just about me, it's also about, I love helping others get better. That's why I'm in the job that I'm in. I think the best thing we can do for our students that go here is instill that leadership and those skills. And so I love helping kids. And when the light goes on, or when all of a sudden they accomplish that goal and you see that, there's no greater reward. I wish it paid better, but there's no greater reward.
Absolutely. And admittedly, you kind of stole my thunder there because you sort of wrapped up three questions into one. But the last question I'll leave you with is this, and I've started doing this in the last few interviews, and it's always super intriguing to hear the answer. If you could go back and find the Roger Hughes of 20, 30, 20, 25 years ago, what is the one thing that you would tell yourself back then that you wish you had known?
Oh, great question. Great question. Don't, regardless of where you come from, don't let what you grew up in stifle your ability to become the best. So, and here's what I mean by that. Coming from small town Crawford, 1,100 people, if you count a few horses and cows that were in the town. I mean, there were some times I had a little bit of, you know what, I don't know if I can do that. I'm just from Crawford. Or I don't know if I could do that. I'm just from Doane. And what I now know is if you do things the right way and have the right values and work your tail off, everybody has to have a little bit of luck. But don't think you can't achieve something simply because, well, I'm from Creek or I'm from Doane. That's bull. Okay, you can go out and achieve anything you need to. Okay, but you have to have the right fundamentals. And you have to stick to the fundamentals all the time. And that's why it's so important that you guys build your brand and build your network when you're here, because there's going to be someone from your class, I promise you, is going to be a multimillionaire. Okay, so if you're starting a business, who do you want to call for investment money? It's going to be that guy you roomed with right down there in Burridge 1, where I lived for a while. I may not want to live there now, but you know what I'm saying? So those are the things. Don't ever underestimate yourself just simply because of where you're from or who you're from. Dream big. Think big. Because, and here's the other thing. When I was at Dartmouth, the first question they asked me at anything was, what's cheapest? At Princeton, when I was there, the first question they asked, what's best? This is dumb. We deserve the best. So let's start with what's best and work back if we can't afford it, rather than start with what's cheapest, because you never get to the midpoint on either one of them. If you start with what's best, you tend to end up at a pretty good spot. And listen, champions do the little things better than anyone else. There's no magic formula. Okay, unless you're winning the lottery, then it's a whole different deal. And yeah, I play it once in a while, but my point is, there's no shortcut to the top. It requires discipline every day to do what you're supposed to do, when you're supposed to do it, the way you're supposed to do it. And that sounds corny as heck, but that's how great ones do it. That's how Tom Brady does what he does. Because every day he gets up and adheres to a diet that keeps him there at 44 years old. That requires remarkable discipline. Because the world will tell you, you don't need to do that. Come on, it's easy. Take a couple days off. You don't. One thing you never get back is time. One thing you don't usually get a lot of additional things is opportunities. So when your opportunity comes, you want to be prepared for it. I'll never forget. I was talking with Tyrone Willingham. He was the head coach at Stanford when I was assistant at Dartmouth. And I said, I need you to pick your brain. He goes, how about right now? And I go, okay. So I said, I'm trying to be a head coach, and I see all my peers. First time they get a job, they're on the phone with the next job. Where I work to get myself the best I can be. So when I get that opportunity, I will be ready. Because you only get so many chances to be a head coach. And he said, well, let me ask you this, Roger, do you think you're doing it right? And I said, I do. But I see my friends advancing faster than me. And it irritates me because I'm doing everything right and they're not even, Roger. I think you're doing it right too, but you have to be willing to accept the consequences of your decision. You decided to do it this way, so don't compare yourself to others. You have a different path. And I would argue my ability to remain a head coach at a place for 9 years and 10 years, when the average life expectancy is 2.5, I would argue that I made the right decision for me. Now, not everyone likes that decision. I would love to cash Nick Saban's paycheck at $9 million a year too. But for me, that was the right thing to do. And if you're committed to it, again, your path is not the same as everyone else's. But the things to get to the number one spot are the same, the fundamentals. And when you don't know what to do, go back to the fundamentals. I'm sorry, I'm rambling on here. I don't mean to.
No, that was absolutely fantastic. And I just want to thank you again immensely. This has been incredibly illuminating. I understand you're a busy man. Again, my name is Travis Handler. I'm the chair for Doane Leadership Educators. I'm here with President Roger Hughes. President Hughes, one more time, thank you so much, sir.
I always like helping people get better.
Have a great day, and I'm sure we'll be in touch soon.
Sounds great, Travis. Thanks for having me on.
Of course.